So welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into something with some seriously big global implications.
Okay.
Donald Trump's second term as U.S. president.
Wow.
You guys sent some fascinating articles from CBS News and NPR. And
Yeah.
let me tell you, these potential ripple effects we're going to talk about today they're really something.
Yeah.
We're talking everything from like what's going to happen to your wallet
Right.
to the whole global fight against climate change.
Yeah.
So are you ready to unpack all this stuff with me?
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting, even before any policies are officially even in place.
Right.
We're already seeing these reactions, especially in the global markets.
Yeah.
It's like the whole world's just kind of holding its breath to see what's going to happen next.
It really does.
Yeah.
It feels like that, yeah. And speaking of reactions, the stock market, oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
It's been on a wild ride.
Huge.
CBS News, they reported that the S&P 500 jumped over 2% the day after the election.
Huge jump. Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
Investors, they're seemingly pretty optimistic about corporate growth under Trump.
Yeah, it is fascinating. That initial jump,
Yeah.
it seems like there's this belief out there that Trump's policies,
Right.
you know, particularly the corporate tax cuts that he's proposing,
Yeah.
they think it's going to lead to more profits for businesses.
Right.
But, you know, we have to remember that this is just like a snapshot,
Yeah.
like a short-term reaction.
Yeah.
The long-term implications, well, those are way more complex.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder about those longer term impacts, like what's going to happen.
Right.
And NPR brought up a really good point that not everyone is out there celebrating this market jump.
Uh-huh.
They pointed out that some European companies,
Okay.
especially the ones that are really reliant on trade with the U.S.,
Right.
like, car manufacturers, we're seeing their share prices actually dip.
Interesting.
Those tariff anxieties are real.
They're real. Yeah, it really shows you how interconnected the global economy is.
Yeah.
You know, Trump's policies, especially when it comes to things like tariffs, they don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
They set off this chain reaction that can impact businesses like all over the globe.
It's like a big global game of Jenga. You pull out the wrong piece and the whole thing could just crumble.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those potential moves. Like, what can we actually expect from Trumponomics 2.0?
Yeah, Trumponomics 2.0. That's what NPR is calling it.
Yeah.
Well, the core of it seems to be all about tax cuts and tariffs.
Okay.
Lower corporate taxes, which Trump has always been pushing for, could, at least in theory, stimulate business growth in the U.S.
Right.
And this could even potentially boost your 401k if companies start seeing those profits going up.
Okay, so maybe there are some potential positives for like our own personal finances.
Right.
But there's got to be a downside, right?
Well, yeah.
Like there's always a trade-off.
There is.
Yeah.
CBS News is warning that those gains we might see from tax cuts, they might be offset by something that we all feel, higher inflation.
Yeah.
Especially if Trump follows through with those campaign promises about putting hefty tariffs on imports.
Yeah.
We could be looking at a 60% tariff on goods from China.
60%, that is a lot.
Yeah.
That would definitely make me think twice before I buy anything made in China. Like, can you imagine what that would do to the price of electronics?
Yeah.
Or clothes?
You got it. Tariffs, they act like this hidden tax on consumers.
Right.
Those costs, they get passed down to us.
Yeah.
And then we all end up having to pay more for like basic everyday things.
So it's like this balancing act.
Yeah.
Right? Potentially higher 401ks.
Right.
But then also higher prices on everything.
Right.
It makes you wonder which side is actually going to win out in the end.
Yeah.
And speaking of downsides, CBS also suggests that those tariffs could make
it's like the dream of owning a home even further out of reach.
Yeah, that's the concern.
Yeah.
That tariffs on imported materials, they're going to drive up construction costs.
Yeah.
New homes, they're going to be more expensive to build.
Right.
Which means that fewer people are going to be able to afford them.
Right, exactly. And then you add in Trump's stance on immigration.
Right.
And things get even more complicated for the housing market, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. CBS points out that if there is a decrease in immigrant labor, which is a huge part of the construction workforce, that could make the housing shortage we're already seeing even worse.
It's like this perfect storm brewing.
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
Higher construction costs, fewer workers.
Yep.
owning a home, it might just become an even bigger challenge than it already is. And on top of all of that, you have concerns about U.S. national debt.
Right.
Both articles, they mentioned that the debt just ballooned.
Oh, yeah.
Under Trump's first term.
NPR uses the term unfunded spending.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of ominous.
Unfunded spending basically means that the government is spending way more than it's actually bringing in through revenue, and that leads to a bigger deficit, and that can then cause interest rates to go up.
Right.
And it makes it even harder to try to tackle the debt. It's like this vicious cycle.
It really does feel like a cycle that's hard to break free from.
Yeah.
And we have to think about, could all of this impact investor confidence?
Oh, it could.
Not just in the U.S., but globally.
Exactly.
I mean, if investors lose confidence in the U.S. economy, wouldn't that trigger instability?
It would.
In financial markets worldwide?
Exactly. The U.S. economy is so deeply connected with the global financial system.
Yeah.
Any little tremors here, they can and they do send shockwaves across the world.
So we've got market volatility. We've got rising inflation, the potential for like a housing crisis, and this looming debt crisis.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to be concerned about?
Well, there's one more really big issue that I think we need to talk about.
Okay.
Climate change.
Right, climate change.
Yeah.
It does feel like the elephant in the room.
It does.
Trump's promises to roll back environmental regulations.
Right.
And to boost fossil fuels.
Right.
Those have definitely caused a stir.
Oh, more than a stir.
Yeah.
They've sent shockwaves through that whole world of climate-linked investments.
Yeah.
NPR suggests that these moves, they could actually block progress on global climate goals.
Right.
Which could then potentially impact everything from renewable energy projects to the future of, all this green tech.
So it's not just that this could impact the environment.
Right.
Which is a huge concern in itself.
Of course.
But it could also have these massive economic consequences.
Exactly.
For the industries that are focused on, sustainable solutions.
Right. Investors, they're factoring climate risks and opportunities into their decisions now more than ever.
Yeah.
So Trump's policies, well, they could create this feeling of uncertainty.
Right.
And potentially even discourage investment.
Yeah.
In those green technologies.
It's a complex web of interconnected issues, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems pretty clear that a second Trump term could really impact the global landscape in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
But what about us as individuals?
Right.
How is it going to impact, us personally?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to explore that a little bit more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, great.
So stay tuned.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It is fascinating to think about, how these big global shifts can actually trickle down and impact our everyday lives.
It is. I mean, we've talked about, the stock market and inflation and all that.
Right.
But how could Trump's policies actually affect the average person's, wallet?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we touched on this idea of, wages potentially going up because of a tighter labor market.
Right.
Especially if Trump actually follows through with those large-scale deportations that he's talking about.
Yeah.
CBS actually suggested that this could mean that employers might have to start offering higher salaries.
Oh, wow.
Just to attract and keep workers.
So on the one hand, you might see more money in your paycheck.
Right.
But on the other hand, that money might not go as far.
Right.
If, everything keeps getting more expensive.
Exactly.
Because of inflation.
It's like this tug of war between those two forces.
Yeah.
And it's really tough to say which one is going to be stronger in the end.
And let's not forget about taxes.
Oh, yeah, taxes.
Trump's tax cuts. They might sound good on the surface, but could they, have some unintended consequences down the line?
That's a really valid point.
Yeah.
Because, while tax cuts can sometimes give the economy this temporary boost, they can also lead to less government revenue, which could make that national debt problem we talked about before even worse.
Right.
So it's this really delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers.
It really feels like, every potential benefit also has a potential downside.
It does.
How are we supposed to make sense of all this?
Well, it's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important to look at these issues critically.
Okay.
Don't just accept those headlines at face value.
Yeah.
You really have to dig a little deeper, look at things from multiple angles, try to understand all the nuances.
It's about, being an informed citizen.
Absolutely.
Not just passively absorbing information.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that leads us to another really important aspect of Trump's potential impact.
Okay.
And that's his whole approach to global trade.
You're right. We talked about the tariffs.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to unpack there.
There is.
NPR actually used the term trade war when they were describing the tensions that happened during Trump's first term.
Yeah.
Could we see something like that happen again?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
We have to remember that Trump has been very vocal about, how dissatisfied he is with a lot of the existing trade deals.
Yeah.
He keeps saying that they put American businesses at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And his solution seems to be just slap on more tariffs.
Yeah. Tariffs, which are extra taxes on imported goods.
Exactly.
Right.
But as we discussed, those tariffs, they can end up hurting us.
They can.
American consumers, because we're the ones who end up paying more for all these everyday products.
Yeah, it's really a paradox.
Yeah.
The idea is to protect American jobs and businesses.
Right.
But what could actually happen is American families end up having to pay more for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just the economics, right?
Oh, absolutely.
These trade disputes,
they
can really strain relationships with our allies and impact global politics.
Right. Trade is so complex.
Yeah.
It's this web of interconnected interests. Yeah. And any kind of disruption can have huge consequences that go way beyond just the economic side of things.
So we're talking potential economic repercussions, potential political fallout.
Right.
Is there anything positive to say about?
Well, some people argue that his really tough stance on trade, that it's actually forced other countries to come to the negotiating table, which could lead to better trade deals for the U.S.
Right. But we still have to wait and see if those deals actually happen.
Right.
And if they actually benefit American workers and consumers in the long run.
It's a wait and see situation.
Yeah.
Speaking of waiting and seeing, let's shift gears for a second.
Okay.
And talk about a topic that's going to have a really, really long-lasting impact.
Okay.
Climate change.
Yeah, climate change. It's just impossible to ignore this.
Yeah.
Especially with Trump's stance on all these environmental regulations.
Yeah, he's vowed to roll back a lot of those Obama-era regulations that were put in place to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Exactly.
And plus, he's like a huge supporter of the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, and that's created a lot of concern among scientists and environmentalists.
Right.
They're arguing that rolling back these regulations, it could actually set back progress on climate action.
Sure. And even potentially make the effects of climate change, which we're already seeing all over the world, even worse.
And it's not just about the environment, is it?
No, not all.
Climate change, it could disrupt industries.
It could.
It could displace communities and drive up costs.
Yeah.
It's a major economic issue too.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a multifaceted issue with implications that touch every part of our lives.
Right.
And Trump's policies, they could have a huge impact on how the world tackles this challenge.
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
I think so.
There's one path that's leading towards more environmental protection, a shift to, cleaner energy sources.
Yeah.
And then there's this other path that leads to, sticking with fossil fuels and a future that's just way riskier when it comes to climate change.
I think that's a really good way to put it. And it just underscores how important these choices are, not just for the U.S., but for the whole world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From the economy and trade to the, very real threat of climate change.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that these aren't just like abstract concepts. This is real stuff. It has real world impacts on people's lives, their jobs, their futures.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that's why we do this.
Exactly.
Right.
That's it.
These deep dives, we want to explore these really complicated issues. We want to think critically about, what the potential consequences could be.
Right.
And hopefully help people make more informed decisions.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The more we understand about what's shaping our world, the better equipped we are to handle all the challenges and to take advantage of the opportunities that come up.
Couldn't agree more.
Right.
And speaking of challenges and opportunities, there's another side to Trump's second term that I think we should explore.
Yeah.
His potential impact on the global political landscape.
Oh, yeah. That's sure to be a lively topic.
Oh, yeah, to say the least. So let's delve into that a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good.
In the final part of our deep dive.
Trump's foreign policy in his first term, well, it was definitely
something else.
Unconventional is a good word for it.
Yeah?
Yeah, he kept the world guessing.
He did.
That's for sure. But, how might his approach to foreign policy change this time around?
Right.
Like, what should we be watching for?
Well, one thing that immediately pops into my head is his relationship with China.
Okay.
We already talked about the trade tensions, right?
But the U.S.-China rivalry, it's way bigger than just the economy.
Yeah.
It's this geopolitical competition that impacts everything.
Yeah.
From military power to technology to, global influence.
Yeah, it's almost like this big global chess match.
Yeah.
With both sides kind of trying to outmaneuver the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Trump's shown that he's not afraid to challenge China's growing power.
Yeah.
Both through his words and his actions.
Right. So how he keeps handling this relationship in a second term.
Yeah, and how China responds.
Yeah.
That's going to have major implications for global stability.
Right. And it's not just China, is it?
No, it's not.
I mean, Trump's also been more confrontational with some of America's traditional allies.
He has.
He's even questioned the value of NATO.
Right.
Which is a pretty long-standing alliance.
Absolutely. That whole America First agenda.
Right.
It's really shifted U.S. foreign policy to be a lot more transactional.
Okay. It's all about what other countries can do for the U.S.
Right.
Instead of focusing on shared values or collective security.
So it's a move away from, multilateralism, working with lots of different countries, towards more bilateralism, just focusing on individual deals that directly benefit the U.S.
Right. And this shift has actually caused some concern among foreign policy experts.
Okay.
They're saying that it weakens U.S. influence on the world stage.
Right.
And that it undermines global cooperation on these really important issues like climate change, terrorism, nuclear weapons, all that.
So it's almost like the U.S. is stepping back.
Yeah, in a way.
From that global leadership role that it's, traditionally held.
It is a real departure from how things have been done since World War II.
Right.
That idea that the U.S. should be actively involved in promoting democracy and stability around the world.
Okay, so a more inward-looking U.S.
Yeah. Potentially, less engaged in global affairs. That's a pretty big shift.
It's a big one, and countries all over the world are watching this really closely. They're trying to figure out what this means for their own security and their own economic interests.
Yeah. It sounds like the world is just holding its breath again.
And,
waiting to see what Trump's going to do next.
Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty can lead to instability.
So what does this all mean for us?
Right.
The average people out there trying to navigate all this?
Well, I think it means we're living in a really, really interesting time.
Yeah.
A time of huge change, a time when all the old rules and assumptions are being questioned.
Yeah.
It's a time that demands our attention. It demands our critical thinking and our engagement.
Yeah. It sounds like we need to be informed and engaged citizens ready to actually participate in the conversations that are going to shape our future.
Absolutely. And that's why I think these deep dives are so important. They give us a chance to, explore these complex issues, to challenge our own assumptions, and hopefully to come away with a better understanding of the world.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the potential economic impact of a second Trump term to the global political landscape.
Right.
It's clear that his policies could have a really big impact on the world stage.
The main takeaway for me is that we are living in a time that's unlike any other.
Yeah.
It's a time of incredible complexity and everything's so interconnected.
Right.
You know, what happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects that reach us all.
And it's up to all of us.
It is.
To stay informed, to engage in these conversations. And to really try to help create a future that's both prosperous and sustainable.
Absolutely. And remember, the deep dive doesn't stop here.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. Keep asking questions.
Right.
Keep learning.
That's right. There's always more to discover.
There is.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.